In the mountain towns, people like to hang a whole life on one sentence. A good man, that Elias Thorne, they would say. Strong as the pines. Shame the war took his chance at children. This is the story behind that sentence. It starts with a doctor's verdict, a stack of unpaid rent, and two people who had almost made peace with living alone. It ends with two small voices calling the one word Elias had never expected to hear in his own house. Papa, my dear friend. Imagine the high country in the mid-1880s. Sharp air, long winters, pine shadows on snow. Somewhere up there, a man had already decided his life would be work, weather, and silence. Down in the valley, a woman was about to decide she would rather risk a hard life with a stranger than starve slowly among people who barely saw her. When Elias Thorne was 19, he went to war with a musket on his shoulder and a girl's ribbon under his collar. A bullet tore through him low in the belly. In a hot canvas hospital tent, the army doctor pressed on the wound, wrote a few words on a scrap of paper, and said the rest of Elias's life in one flat breath. You're lucky to be alive, Thorne. You'll work, you'll ride. You may get old, but you won't be a father. That part of you is finished. Best make your peace with it. The girl who had given him the ribbon tried to make peace too. She lasted a week. Then she came to his parents' house, folded the faded ribbon back into his hand, and whispered that she had always dreamed of a house full of children. She did not know how to let go of that dream, so she let go of him instead. After that, the town added a shadow to his name. Fine hand with stock, knows the trails. Shame about the wound. That last line always came, like a period at the end of a sentence that would not change. Elias did not argue. He finished his service, went higher into the hills, and bought a narrow valley where a cold creek ran between the pines. He built a stout log house with his own hands. He ran cattle, cut hay, trapped a little in winter, hauled timber when he needed cash. The work was honest. The nights were long. No one sat across the table and wondered whether he was enough. By the time he passed 35, people stopped asking if he would ever marry. Men envied his land and his quiet. Women shook their heads over his empty house. That mountain man, they called him now. The words "can't have children" followed close behind, like a second name. 30 miles downhill, in the town of Cedar Ridge, Clara James stood on a worn boardwalk and listened to her landlord tap on wood. 3 months back rent, Mr. Holloway said, nailing a notice to the boarding house door. I gave you grace when your mother passed, but grace doesn't buy coal. You pay by the end of the week, Miss James, or I find someone who can. Clara folded her hands so he would not see them shake. You know I've been sewing for half the town, she said quietly. You know I've taken in washing. And I'm telling you it hasn't been enough, he cut in. You need a man's wage or a husband's roof. You've got neither. Time's running out. When he walked away, she stayed in the doorway, staring toward the blue line of mountains. Her father, dead these 3 years, had loved those peaks. Up there, he used to say, pointing with a calloused hand, a person can breathe in peace. Peace felt a long way off. So did next month's rent. The preacher's wife found her like that a few minutes later. Child, you all right? Miss Audra asked. She was short, round, and always smelled faintly of yeast and lamp oil. I'm fine, Clara lied, just thinking about winter. Miss Audra's eyes took in the nailed notice in one quick glance. She did not ask to read it. She did not have to. Come sit, she said. Coffee's hot. And there's something I've been holding back, because I didn't know how you'd take it. In the warm little kitchen of the parsonage, with a chipped mug between her hands, Clara waited while the older woman fussed with the stove more than it needed. There's a man up in the high valley, Miss Audra said at last. Elias Thorne. You've seen him in church. Tall, quiet. Sits in the back. I know of him, Clara said. Everyone did. He came to the preacher last week, said he needs help, wants a woman who can cook without burning beans, keep a house standing, and stand more silence than talk. He has a spare room. He'll pay fair. Winters are hard up there. He can't keep up alone. Clara's heart gave one quick, hard beat. A roof, regular meals, work that did not depend on how many dresses she could finish before her eyes blurred. Then Miss Audra lowered her voice. "He's a good man," she said. "But you know what folks say. The war left him different. There won't be babies, Clara. Not if you go up there. Not if you marry him someday. I wouldn't be your friend if I let you walk into that blind." Clara stared into her coffee. The steam blurred her vision. "People already whisper that I'm left on the shelf," she said. "Most decent men my age already have wives. The rest are in love with a whiskey bottle. No one's knocking on my door with a ring and a cradle, Miss Audra. Right now, no one's even knocking with supper." The older woman reached for her hand. "I thought of you first when Elias asked," she said. "You're steady. You don't scare easy. This isn't the life you dreamed of. But it might be a life. A safe one. And sometimes that's all a woman gets offered." Clara thought of the soft dream she had once had. A baby's weight on her shoulder. A small voice calling her mama. That dream had already been broken once when the young man she loved chose a richer bride. Maybe growing up, she thought, was learning which dreams you could not afford to chase anymore. "What does he want me to be?" she asked. "A housekeeper? A wife? Something between?" "He said housekeeper," Miss Audra replied. "But he also said a man shouldn't be alone up there that long. I don't think he knows yet what else his heart wants. He just knows he needs help." Clara looked toward the small window, where you could just see the faint line of the hills. "Write to him," she said. "Tell him I'll come. Not for charity, for a bargain. I bring my work and my company. He brings a roof and his word." 2 weeks later, she sat on a wagon seat beside Jacob the teamster as his horses climbed the narrow road into the hills. The town shrank behind them. The air turned sharp and clean. Patches of old snow lingered in the shadows. "You can still tell me to turn around," Jacob said once. "We'd be back by noon. Holloway never has to know." "If I go back, he'll have my trunk on the street by tomorrow," Clara answered, fingers tight around her small Bible. "At least this way I'm riding toward something." By midday, they turned off the main road and followed a rough track along a rushing creek. On a low rise above the water stood a 2-story log house with a deep porch and a stone chimney. A man waited on that porch, hands in his pockets, watching the wagon draw near. Elias Thorne was broader in the shoulders than he looked from the church pew. Dark hair, early gray at the temples, a scar along his jaw, a faint drag in his right leg when he stepped off the porch that you would miss if you were not looking. His eyes were not hard. They were careful, like a man who had learned not to show too much hope. "Miss James," he said when Jacob helped her down. His voice was low and rough from disuse. "I'm Elias Thorne." "Mr. Thorne," she answered, smoothing her skirt. "Thank you for having me." "This isn't charity," he said at once. "You cook, you keep house, you help with what work you can. I pay you in wages and a roof. If it's too hard, you go back down with Jacob when he comes. No one is trapped here. Not you, not me. A bargain," she thought, "not a chain." Inside, the house was plain and clean. Big room with a stone hearth. Table and 2 chairs. A rocker by the fire. Shelves of books along one wall. He gave her the front bedroom. He kept the back room. For the first days, they moved around each other politely, like strangers on a narrow trail, careful not to crowd. On the 3rd evening, with wind sliding down from the peaks and brushing the walls, they sat by the fire. he in the rocker, she on a low stool mending. "Miss James," he said quietly, "there's something you ought to hear from me, not from some wagging tongue in town." She set down the shirt. "I know what people say," she replied, "about the wound, about the war. Do you know there will be no children?" he asked. "Ever. Not by me." He said it the way a man reads a figure off a ledger. Flat. Final. "The army doctor told me straight," he went on. "My first sweetheart heard it, and she left. I don't blame her. A person has a right to want a noisy house. But I won't have any woman under this roof without knowing what I can't give." Clara folded her hands in her lap. "I'm sorry you've had to say those words so many times," she said. "And I'm sorry people act like that's the only thing worth knowing about you. I came here because I needed work and safety, not because I expected a cradle. I'd be lying if I said I never wanted a child. But life has already taken other things from me. I've had to learn not to measure my worth by what I don't have." His shoulders eased just a little. "Then we understand each other," he said. "You won't look at me like I failed you. I won't offer what I don't have. We'll build something else here, something we can both live with." Winter came early and hard. Snow stacked against the windows. The creek froze in places, whispering under the ice. Jacob's wagon did not always make it through. Their world shrank to the house, the barns, and the ring of dark trees. In that small world, something changed. Supper grew less silent. He told careful pieces of stories from the war. She spoke of her father's freight runs and the way he taught her to read clouds. Little by little, those pieces laid a path between two quiet lives. One night a storm rolled in faster than either of them had expected. After supper, Elias went out to check a stretch of fence. By the time Clara finished the dishes, snow was slanting past the windows in thick white sheets. He should have been back. She paced. She fed the fire. She told herself that mountain men knew how to walk in storms. When another hour passed, something in her snapped. She grabbed his spare coat, took the lantern, and stepped out into the white roar. The wind slapped her in the face. Snow stung like thrown sand. She kept to the narrow path she had walked beside him many times. Not far from the house, she saw a darker shape ahead. A man, leaning on a fence post, one hand pressed to his thigh. "What are you doing out here?" he shouted when he saw her. "You'll freeze." "So will you," she shouted back. "You were gone too long." His knees buckled. She caught his arm. Together they staggered back, two people wrapped in one stubborn will. Inside, both shaking, she pulled off his wet boots, scolded him for going out when the sky already looked mean, and made him drink strong tea with a splash of whiskey. "No one's dragged me out of a storm since the war," he said quietly at last. "I'd forgotten what it felt like to have someone come looking." "You'd better get used to it," she answered, trying to keep her voice steady. "If you insist on doing foolish things with that leg, someone has to keep an eye on you." He watched her for a long moment. "Clara," he said. Just her name. But it sounded different now, like a word he had been keeping behind his teeth. By Christmas Eve, the sky was clear and hard with stars. After supper, Elias stood, set his hand on the mantel, and looked at her as if he had been practicing this in his head for weeks. "I asked the preacher for a housekeeper," he said slowly. "I thought that was all I had any right to ask for. Your work for my wages. But this house feels different with you in it. Better. If you'd have it, I'd like to call this something more." He turned fully toward her. "I can't offer what most men offer when they ask a woman to be their wife," he said. No children of my body, no big house in town, just this valley, this work, and whatever heart is left in me. If you'd be my wife, I'd give you my name and all of that heart." Clara thought for a moment of how the town might talk. A woman nearly 30, marrying the man they called crippled and sterile, far from shops and church bells. Then she remembered the man who cut extra wood so she would not shiver, who fixed loose boards after seeing her stumble once, who listened when she spoke. "This house feels more like home than anywhere I've lived since my parents died," she said. "You treat me with respect. You listen. If you want to call this a marriage, I'll gladly stand before God and say I do. Then when the road opens, we'll ride down and—" She shook her head. "We'll speak to God here," she said gently. "The preacher can write it down later." So they stood in front of the fire, hands linked, and repeated simple words. To have and to hold. For better, for worse. In sickness and in health. When they reached the part about children, she changed it. "For whatever life comes," she said, "whatever shape it takes." "For whatever life comes," he echoed. Their first kiss was gentle and a little shy. It did not set the room spinning. It set something steady and quiet in place, like a new beam in a house. Spring came slow but sure. Snow pulled back from the rocks. Wildflowers tried their luck. One mild morning as Clara washed dishes, a wave of sickness hit so hard she had to grip the table. She barely made it to the back step before she lost her breakfast. "Must have been the bacon," she muttered, pale and sweating, when Elias found her. Except bacon had never done that before. When the same thing happened 2 days later, and again the next week, another thought crept in. She tried to push it away. It stayed. Her monthly bleeding had always been as regular as the moon. It had not come for 6 weeks. Her breasts were tender. Smells seemed sharper. She stood in front of the little calendar and counted days with a shaking finger. Then she rested her hand on her flat belly and closed her eyes. She knew. Joy came first, bright and wild. After all the years of telling herself that dream was gone, her heart leaped toward it. Right behind it came fear. She thought of Elias and the doctor's flat voice in that canvas tent. She knew how deep that never sat inside him. She waited 3 more days. The sickness did not stop. Her body felt different in ways she could not deny. One evening, with the sky soft and pink over the ridge, she found him by the barn. "Elias," she said, "I need to tell you something." He turned at once. "Are you ill again?" he asked. "I've been thinking to fetch Doc Martin. I don't like how pale you've been." "It isn't that kind of sickness," she said softly. "At least I hope not." She took a breath. "I'm late," she said, "very late. And the mornings. I felt this when my mother carried my youngest brother. She used to say, 'That's just the baby letting me know it's there.'" He went very still. "Clara," he whispered. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying there is a baby letting me know it's there," she answered. "Our baby. There's been no one else. There never will be. The timing says the child is yours." For a long moment he just looked at Herman, as if the ground had tilted. Hope flashed across his face, bright and fragile. Fear slammed over it. "That's not possible," he said hoarsely. "The doctor said—" "I know what he said," she cut in. "You've carried his words like a stone for half your life. But my body is saying something different. We can go to him. Let him listen. Maybe he'll call it a miracle. Maybe he'll say he was wrong. Either way, there is a child in me." He turned away, hand going to the scar along his jaw. "I need to walk," he said. "I need to think." He did not slam the gate. He just walked into the trees. Waiting for him felt longer than any winter. He came back hours later, when the stars were sharp over the ridge. He stopped at the bottom of the steps. "Did you think I wouldn't come back?" he asked quietly. "The thought crossed my mind," she answered. He let out a slow breath. "I walked all the way to the ridge," he said. "Thought about keeping on. Not because I doubt you. I don't. God help me, I don't. But because hope hurts, Clara. I've been so sure for so long of who I am. The man who can't have children. Now you're telling me I might have been wrong about my own life." She stepped down and took his hand. "I'm afraid too," she said. "Afraid to be happy. Afraid to lose what we have. Afraid you'll look at me and wonder if I lied, even though you know I didn't. But I'd rather be afraid together than safe apart." He squeezed her fingers. "I don't doubt you," he said again. "If I doubt anything, it's the doctor. It's my own small idea of what's possible. Tomorrow we'll ride down. We'll make Doc Martin earn his pay." Doc Martin listened to Clara's story, examined her with brisk, gentle hands, and pressed his old ear trumpet against her belly. He frowned, smiled, frowned again. "Well now," he said at last, calling Elias into the room. "Either the Lord enjoys surprising us, or I didn't know as much as I thought when I was young." "Is she?" Elias could not finish. "Pregnant," the doctor said. "No doubt. And unless my old ears lie, there are 2 in there. I hear 2 little heartbeats. Busy as anything. Twins," Clara whispered. "As for you, Thorne," Doc Martin went on, squinting over his spectacles, "I remember that wound. I remember saying your chances of children were slim. I might even have said never. We doctors like that word more than we should. Here stands your wife, belly full, telling me I was wrong. Call it rare. Call it mercy. I'll call it a lesson in keeping my mouth shut when God hasn't finished speaking." On the ride home, Elias held the reins in a tight grip. Every now and then he shook his head and laughed under his breath, like a man waking from a long, bad dream. 2, he said softly. "A boy and a girl. Or 2 boys. Or 2 girls. 2 babies to turn this quiet house upside down," Clara said, laughing through her tears. He looked at her then, and for the first time the joy in his face had no shadow behind it. "I don't know how to be a father," he admitted. "I never let myself imagine it." "We'll learn together," she said, "one long night at a time. Pregnancy in the high country is not soft. The air is thin. The work never stops. Mud grabs at boots in spring. Frost comes early and late." Clara's back ached. Her ankles swelled. Sleep became a puzzle of shifting from one side to the other. But through it all, she felt life move inside her. Sometimes a flutter. Sometimes a strong, deliberate kick that made her catch her breath and rest both hands on her belly. Elias took every heavy chore he could wrestle away. He carried water. He chopped wood. He fixed every loose board and gate he could find. "You're hovering," she told him once, half amused, half exasperated. "You carried my name up here," he answered. "You're carrying my children now. Let me carry the rest." At night, he sat on the edge of the bed and laid his big hand on her rounded belly. "Hello in there," he said quietly. "This is your father. I didn't think I'd ever get to say that. Your mama says you can hear me, so I'm going to start practicing now." The first time one of the babies kicked into his palm, he jerked, then started to laugh. Not the small guarded laugh she heard over coffee sometimes. Something young and astonished that broke right out of him. "They're real," he whispered. "I know that sounds foolish. I've watched you grow round as a harvest moon. I've heard the doctor. But feeling them, that makes it real in my bones." "You think I didn't know they were real when they sent me running for the back step every morning?" she teased, wiping at her own tears. He bent his head and rested his forehead on her belly. "I'll teach you to read the sky and follow a trail," he told the unseen babies. "Your mama will teach you everything else worth knowing. Between us, maybe we'll raise you into decent human beings." As her time drew near, neighbors in town sent what they could. Miss Audra sent quilts. The preacher's daughter sent jars of broth jelly. Doc Martin said he would come if the roads allowed, but the mountain would have the final say. The first pains came on a night when the wind was already up. Rain lashed the roof. Thunder rolled along the ridge. By dawn, the road down the valley was a river of mud, and the creek was roaring. "We won't get the doctor up here," Elias said, jaw tight, as another contraction bent Clara double over the bed they had moved into the front room. "We have what we need," she panted. "God, your hands, my stubbornness, it'll have to be enough." He looked more frightened than he ever had in any storm. He wiped her face with a cool cloth. He held her when the pains came hard and close. He whispered that she was strong, that he was with her, that he was not going anywhere. When the first baby slipped into his hands, red and furious and loud, a sound came out of him that was half laugh and half sob. "A boy," he choked. "Clara, we have a son. Don't count your blessings yet," she gasped. "There's still another one arguing with my ribs." The second twin took longer. Long enough for fear to press its cold fingers along both their spines. But at last, with one more long push that tore a cry from deep in her, another small body slid into his hands. This one came out quieter, then drew breath and filled the room with a sharp, strong wail. "A girl," he whispered, voice shaking. "We have a daughter too." They wrapped the babies in soft cloths and laid them on Clara's chest. One rooted blindly for milk. The other tucked a tiny fist under his chin and sighed. "Benjamin," Elias said, stroking the boy's downy hair. "After my grandfather." "Anna," Clara murmured, touching the little girl's cheek. "After my mother's mother. She was stubborn and strong. This one feels like she will be too." When the storm moved on, and the light came back clear and clean over the valley, the log house above the creek held 4 people instead of 2. Elias sat on the edge of the bed and watched his wife sleep with both babies tucked against her. "The mountain man who couldn't have children," he said softly. "That's what they've called me for half my life. I suppose they'll have to find another name now." Clara opened her eyes, heavy with exhaustion, but bright with a quiet joy. "Let them talk," she whispered. "They talked before when they didn't know the truth. They'll talk now. What matters is this room, these babies, you and me." He took her hand, careful not to disturb the small, warm bodies between them. "What matters," he agreed, "is that I spent so many years believing the best part of my life was denied me. All the while it was walking up the mountain in your arms." My dear friend, if anyone has ever hung the word never around your neck like a weight, I hope this story keeps you company tonight. Doctors speak from what they know. Neighbors speak from what they have seen. Sometimes they're right. Sometimes they're wrong. The one who writes the whole story is not finished just because they say so. Up in that high valley, a man who was sure he would never be called Papa learned to answer to that name twice at once, to two small voices with his eyes and their mother's stubborn chin. There were still lean years and hard winters, but there were also little boots by the door, drawings tacked up by the stove, and laughter that bounced off the log walls. The mountain man who couldn't have children spent the rest of his days teaching two of them to read the sky, to follow a trail, and to believe that sometimes, even after many cold seasons, new life can still come walking up the path. If this story warmed some quiet corner of your heart, go ahead and hit subscribe so we can keep sharing evenings like this together. And if you believe life can still surprise us with second chances, leave a comment below and tell me you're listening out there in the mountains.